Happy March!
Yeah, it's March indeed.
Yes. So we have so many things to talk about today. I actually think we may have to divide this topic into two different quilts first, because there were so many questions and there is a lot to go through. So we will get started, and as always, this video will remain on our Facebook page after today, or later, and we'll also upload it to our YouTube channel.
Yeah. Usually the upload happens either today or tomorrow to YouTube, but you'll at least be able to see it here on Facebook for a while.
And I was really, we should introduce ourselves. I'm Week Stringle.
And I'm Bill Kerr.
Yeah. So I was like,
we know,
we should be doing that more.
We know a lot of you,
yes,
either through social media or in person, but if not, hi.
Yes. So a couple of things to talk about before we start into the brights, which is our new line. Oh, we did the unpacking, I guess, last time of our new Sunnyside line, and then we showed our new alfresco quilt,
which,
and
with luck, there are kits on our website. I think right now I pushed the button right before we got on, but I didn't have time to double check. So I think it's there. If not, the kits will be available afterwards.
So this is a super simple quilt that is designed to be able for you to whip it up quickly and to make the most of the fabrics and the prints. And you want to get a little more up close so you can see?
Yeah.
This is all made from our Sunnyside line. And there are, as we said, we make quilts for lots of different levels. And there's two things. There's the time it takes to make the quilt, because even if it's easy, it can be time consuming. And then there's things that are difficult, in terms of your skill level.
Technical challenges. And this is one of the quilts that's very straightforward, all rectangles basically. And straight line sewing. But what I loved, when we piece this, what I find nice about this quilt is the fabrics themselves have such nice color and prints that just working with them to me is relaxing. And
I want to share that this was like a really big deal for me, because this is the first quilt I've been able to quilt in 2 years. So this is 2 years. I was injured in 2 different car accidents within a month of each other 2 years ago, and so I haven't been able to use our long arm quilting machine.
And it's all freehand quilted, and it was a big deal. Definitely scary, because she didn't know how it would go, and it went beautifully. So
that was a big. I'm sorry if there is starting and stopping of the live stream where you are, Sarah Beth. We know that we are in good shape here because we have a super strong connection.
I will make one other quick change just in case, but it's most likely on your end.
Yeah, and because we can only control our end of it, feel free to watch it later, stream on YouTube or here on Facebook as well. Because we, as I said, we can't always control how it looks for other people. So then also, let me grab this. We're talking about Sunnyside. We have Sunnyside bundles. We sold out of these in the first 24 hours, and so we've been scurrying to get new ones made for you. And this has one of each of the 21 colors or fabrics in the line. So the Sunnyside bundles are available on our website. Also, all our lines are available around the world. So ask your local quilt shop if you're either not in this country, or if you have a local quilt shop, they may be getting it. With the supply chain issues, everything is a little unpredictable right now. I know we've been waiting since November for white fabric, plain white fabric. So it's just kind of a crazy time in terms of getting things in. But as we have explained before, We only take orders for things we have in stock. And that is because we don't want to keep your money if we don't have something to give you right away.
We want to make sure you can do quilting. Okay.
So, any rate, so we've talked about the alfresco kits.
Yes.
And we've talked about the Sunnyside bundles are up, and you can see all the pretty prints behind us. So we have so many questions about brights.
It's been great when you send us questions ahead of time.
Yeah.
Because you can't see Weeks's her
I have all the
journal.
notes.
She has lots of notes.
Yes.
Very well prepared for
Yes.
this. But we do want to. Do you want to touch on those solids or that's later?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I won't
Okay.
get in the way. I'll
So-
follow her lead.
So we do a palette of the month. We've just started this year with our Benertex Superior Solids that, except for that rascally white that we're still, apparently it's like next week, maybe. But otherwise we keep all 100 in stock.
And it's been, as we mentioned before, it's really fun for us to have all of them. And because there's always inspiration. So this palette of the month is our way of kind of sharing that joy of having them with you. So,
but it's also for me, I think, because we've taught so much. I know that people are accustomed to pulling colors from a focus fabric or whatever, and then they don't know what to do with solids. So we put together, this is the Paradise bundle for March. So this is the palette.
I hope that gets you out of any
Yes.
grayness if you're in the wintry areas of the world
Or even
now.
if you're not.
Yeah.
Even if you're not. And, what we did with this line was think about someplace that was exotic and lush and colorful. But it's kind of an example that you don't have to have every color of the rainbow for it to be bright.
And it was also putting it together is totally cooperative. Weeks puts out we talk about the inspiration. We knew we both wanted some kind of tropical paradise escape. And we would each add a couple fabrics, the other would add more. It was kind of a back and forth because we didn't want just a standard spring kind of Eastery palette.
Right.
And
Pastels only.
we probably went through about 20 fabrics and distilled it down to these 10 for the Paradise bundle.
But we started with this magenta, and I think we started with this one, which is very bright.
Kind of a fuchsia.
And one of the things that we learned really quickly is that if we had some darker greens in it initially, but it was just too jarring to have those complementary colors in there in the same levels of saturation. So we'll talk about all that in a moment, but I wanted to show you our Paradise bundle. As we've explained before, we will have these bundles for as long as the supplies last. They won't be here in November. So, the campfire bundle in January, I think we have maybe one left, and then we'll just kind of move on.
We'll be,
Throughout the year, there'll be different.
We'll replenish
Yes,
some.
limited edition.
Yes.
Yes.
No promises.
Yes, exactly. But so, in order to talk about brights, we have to have. Would you grab the color wheel, please? We have to have a really brief and easy discussion. We hope about.
Since today is all about brights, so
about color. So this is color theory in a nutshell that we can do in a quick live stream. So there are 3 words that we want you to know about color.
And we use these every class we teach, every time we write about anything. So it's just important to have this shared vocabulary.
Yeah, because, and this isn't our theory, this is Joseph Eiton, and this is thousands of years of color theory. And it's different if you're a painter. Painting is taught differently because you're mixing colors, so that's a little bit different. But this is color theory for quilters. Okay, the first word that we need to agree on is hue. And in this color wheel, there are, Bill designed this color wheel, and there are an infinite number of spokes you could have on this color wheel. But a hue is going to be the entire range of light to dark of one part of the spectrum that you see.
One ray. So
Yeah.
think of it as generally, if you have the 8 box of crayons, you have green, red, yellow, blue. Those are hues. That's most of the time when people say, what color is it? They're actually meaning what hue is it? Because that's what we react to first. It's just that blue, green, orange.
Right. And then you'll see on this color wheel that each hue is divided into various steps of values. So the value is the lightness or darkness of the hue. So each of these rings in this color wheel is a value. And so we refer to a lighter value and a darker value.
So white would be the lightest, black would be the darkest. So as you go to the center of the color wheel, it gets lighter in value. As you go to the outside, it gets darker. Those steps are artificial. The reality is it's infinite, the spectrum.
But it helps you
But this
see.
just helps break it down to make it easy.
So one of the things that I feel like this is the reason this is so important to get this vocabulary down is that in classes people would say, what shade of blue do I need? And I didn't really know what that meant because there is a technical association that shade
Has a meaning.
has a meaning, but usually people are using shade as a synonym for hue. And it's really important, or it might be value, lighter or darker, or it may be saturation. So this is why we have to
Agree.
agree on how we're going to talk and break down the characteristics of a color.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to talk about saturation?
Sure. So hue and value are the two that are most easy to understand because we see them and talk about them all the time. Saturation, we often say, is the secret sauce to color work, and it's the most confusing. Saturation is the intensity or purity of any given hue. So if you have pure bright red, that is a saturated red. Often quilters use the term bright to mean saturated. So if you say bright blue, bright green, bright purple, in general, quilters are thinking, along the same lines, and that means saturated. Desaturated means not having the purity of that color. So quilters often use the terms dusty or muddy, and we'll see here, this is a very saturated red. It's like pure red. Do you see the one behind it? If you put them side by side, they're nearly the exact same value, like light and dark, but this one is a little dingier. It's not as pure. And this is,
use the word
I should use dingy because, okay.
Yeah.
But it's not as,
saturated.
it's desaturated. So desaturated doesn't mean necessarily that it's lighter or that it's darker. That's value. Desaturated means it's just not as pure. And that desaturation can come from many different reasons. It can have that there's a little green in it or a little white in it. It's one of the kind of visualizations I sometimes use is if you have a bucket and you fill it to the very brim with absolutely pure red paint, if you put anything other than that red in there, whether it's white, blue, green, it will make it no longer 100% red. And it gets a little confusing because if you put a lot of yellow in, then it can turn orange.
It becomes a different hue.
And so hue, value, and saturation are all really linked together. If you add white to red, it becomes desaturated. It's no longer 100% red, but because you added white, it also at the exact same time gets a little lighter. So there's this.
But I think what the thing that's really there are a bunch of things that we hear when we're teaching that other people have taught or told them that I think send people down the wrong path or kind of
Or can be confusing.
muddy the issue. And so one of, and saturation is not taught a lot. And I think that is why.
It's rarely taught.
Yeah. And so brights are saturated colors. And so I think, for example, one of the things that I think has confused people is the thing I hear a lot, which is, well, you should just take a picture of it. You should take a picture of your palette and then change it to the black and white setting, and then that will help you see whether or not your palette is working. And that doesn't work. Because it doesn't take into consideration saturation. It only addresses value.
If you take a photo and make it black and white, it desaturates everything. And it's very, very effective in seeing the value when it becomes black and white. Is it white, gray, black?
Right.
But if you had one fabric that was brighter than all the others, but the same value, the gray would look like it belonged in the black and white, but it might pop. And the other thing is, quilt shops are organized first primarily by hue. The color wall tends to be all the reds together, all the oranges together, all the greens. Depending on the quilt shop and who's working that day, sometimes they're then organized generally from in value. So it might be the dark reds make their way over to the light pinks on the wall. But there's not a special place for the saturated ones. So you might have a bright red or a bright pink in the middle of that wall, and they might kind of pop out, and it can be confusing. Like, what's going on here?
I think the thing that's tricky is that when you, if you're looking at the hue, it can work fine, but the saturation won't work, and then it'll jump out at you. And so, and I think if you are, well, anyway, I want to get to our sort of...
We'll give examples of this, and I think the main thing of us saying this right away is to recognize that it takes a while to wrap your head around this, and it takes practice. But if something doesn't look right, people usually think it's either the wrong hue or the wrong value. And we just want you to start thinking about, hey, what's this thing called saturation, and how does it fit in?
Yeah. And Kathy said she never understood the black and white picture suggestion. Every class, I swear, every class I've taught for 20 years, people have told somebody that, and it's hard for me to say, no, don't do that, because it's not, I understand.
It's just one aspect. Yeah. It's like, it's not some perfect solution.
So the number one tip for working with brights is to understand the concept of bright and what it is and what saturation is, because things can be the same hue, but if you use these two, if these two are not the same in a quilt, and they won't react the same to other colors.
Because a bright will always draw your attention. A saturated color, like the physics, the optics of it, is saturated colors draw attention.
So, for example, this is a more, I guess we call it a more traditional quilt palette. And you can look at the difference between how this red, the less saturated red, if you wanted a red center
for a log cabin
or something like that, this red is going to look a lot better than this red.
Simply because it's desaturated
it's such a small
just
amount.
A little bit. I mean, these aren't that different, but because every single one of these is desaturated, there are no brights. The problem is this fabric stands out, this saturated red stands out for three reasons. One, it's a solid. These are all prints. Two, it's red. None of these is pure red. and 3, it's totally saturated.
And these aren't.
So when you
So this
go
is going to
that-
look so much better. And again, this is the challenge is, is that a lot of people have learned color by growing up and dressing themselves and decorating their homes. And that's a very different situation when you're just dealing with 2 prints or whatever. If you're trying to wrestle, in one case 253 prints, together.
What we just made, yes.
Then you have to really understand the color a little bit more. But one of I would say the number 2 tip for dealing with brights is choosing a range of hues and values and saturations and not trying to put everything in all at once.
Yeah.
So when we were choosing the Paradise bundle, would you please point out
Yes.
how we stuck to one side of the
Basically,
color wheel.
we're just working with the greens, yellow greens specifically, over to we go a little towards the pinky purple, but they're mostly kind of corals. So it's really dividing the color wheel in half. We did not include any of these dark purples, dark blues, which actually could look great. It's just a different approach. By limiting this, it immediately takes what could have been really bright and it calms it down a little bit.
So part of this too is that if one of the rule of thumb for working with brights is that if you're going to use brights, and actually I think this is for palettes in general, you don't want to use every single spoke of hue, every single level of value, and every single saturation. I mean, that's when it's just visually, the brain can't understand what the intention is.
Because it's everything.
Yeah. So what we did here was say, okay, we're going to use that half, and we're not going to use these super darks, but we're going to kind of have this mid-range into the center. So a lot of the success you'll have in working with saturated colors and brights is not trying to use everything all at once, unless you've got hundreds and hundreds of fabrics, and then you might be able to get away with it. But even then, hold back on one area. I don't know if this makes sense or not.
And to me, I always say
let me know in the comment section if that makes sense.
If you start using saturated colors from every spoke, from every hue, you really quickly get that crayon box. And honestly, it's when quilts can look like, oh, that's a kid's quilt.
Yeah.
That is, which probably shouldn't be the case, but the reality is we associate a lot of kids stuff with that rainbow of colors. Now, if that's your intention, that's great. It's all about the intention. If you want that rainbow quilt, then there's a reason to go for every spoke. But sometimes people inadvertently go a little on the kind of preschool looking side.
Or they think that more is better. And sometimes having a little bit of restraint helps you organize it.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same way that if you cook, if you think about sort of flavor profiles and if you're making soup, for example, you're not putting every single spice you have in it. You're kind of
a bit of this, a bit of that.
Yeah, you're having a range of spices.
It's targeted.
Right, exactly. So you might not have nutmeg in the soup, and you might not have cinnamon in the soup, and then if you're baking, you don't necessarily have basil and sage in your cookies, for example. So so the number 2 tip is to choose a range that will work with your brights and not try to use everything.
And, oh, Christine, you ask about this wheel, whether it's permanently up. That's actually a good question.
It's in our heads.
It's in our heads, but what
Yeah.
we do have is, and I'll grab them really quickly.
Oh, I can grab them a little
Oh,
closer.
she'll get them.
Yeah.
We actually printed out tiny little versions of this exact color wheel on, I think they're maybe 3 by 4 inches, and they're two-sided. And we used them originally just in workshops, but we had so many people ask about them that we sell just
Little color wheels.
little color wheels.
There's 10 of them.
Like a pack of 10 for $5.
Yeah.
And they're two-sided. And we use these sometimes when we're teaching, oh, sorry, there's a lot of glare there, with a Sharpie, just kind of point and mark as you're developing a palette, because sometimes when you actually put a Sharpie dot at each place, you see interesting patterns. You see like, oh, maybe everything is clustered on one side of the color wheel. Maybe it's like buckshot everywhere. Maybe everything's light. So for us, the color wheel isn't kind of the be all and end all at all. You know, we don't teach color wheel classes. We just use it to help inform decisions.
I mean, I think that the number one thing to explain in terms of talking about brights and colors is that there is no recipe, and that it's all a matter of figuring out. It's a tool.
It's a tool.
And you want to figure out how to use it. And so a lot of students who are struggling with color find it useful to have color wheels that they can plot it out so they can understand. And it helps you see what your palette is. You know, both of us have a lot of training, and we've been, you know, design education and that kind of thing. So the color wheel's permanently in our heads. We talk into like a language that people would find odd.
Yeah,
You know?
because we're trying to be specific. And when you ask Christine, like those color wheels, they're on our website under Notions, I think.
Yeah.
And if it's useful, great. I don't think we have any picture of it anywhere on the website. We use them often in books we write or articles to illustrate points, though.
Although I have been thinking that we should print up a larger one, because I think people would like to have this in their sewing rooms, and so that's kind of on our to-do list, our long to-do list.
Yeah, we always have a
Okay,
to-do
so
list.
we gotta go to number 3.
She keeps us on track.
I'm trying because it's already 12:28 and we've got lots to go. But like I said, I think April is gonna be part 2, Brights part 2.
Plus something else.
Yes. So one of the things that I think, and this answers some of the questions we've gotten to about I have to say this so carefully, the term a place to rest your eyes, and using brights with other colors. And Bill and I have...
Well, can you use it in an example?
So, for example, one of the questions was, how do you use bright fabrics and then provide a place to rest your eyes? And then often people will look at quilts we've made and they'll say, oh, I like the way you included, for example, if we were going to use this Paradise palette, if we used it with a khaki or something like that.
Which we would very often do.
Yeah. And people would say, oh, it's a nice place to rest your eyes. And that terminology makes me a little crazy, because to me it's kind of like saying, oh, if you're if you're making a vegetable soup, that the broth is a place to rest your tongue. I mean, you're seeing it all at once, and your eyes aren't looking just at one color at a time. But I think that people are using that term to talk about contrast.
They understand the role.
Yeah.
Like it's to me, I always tell Weeks she's parsing words, but I think that people understand there is a very important role here. The idea that it's a place to rest your eyes probably isn't in our minds the best way to express that.
Yeah. But it's a very common idiom that's used.
Yeah.
And I always think of the eyes as going over and sitting on a park bench. You know? That's not how it works.
But let's actually talk about what it does and why Weeks pulled out that, like, a lot of people talk about the power of neutrals. Very often, what we try to tell people is neutral is relative. You know, neutral doesn't have to mean gray. Neutral is usually just
different, less saturated, or
often less,
a different value. So, for example, if we didn't want to use this khaki,
although I love that khaki,
I love it with it too.
And actually, can we just talk about it for just a second? The reason we're both responding to it is this is desaturated. No one is ever going to call this bright. And when you put it with these, a couple things happen. You notice that the value is kind of like the lighter ones here. It's not lighter, it's not darker.
I'm gonna splay this out.
So it doesn't stand out, because if it were white, white is actually very bright. It's, in terms of value, it's the lightest value you can have. So this is actually kind of a light medium.
So let's get this.
Okay.
Here. You hold that, yes. I will hold these.
Actually, maybe I put right in front.
Yeah.
All right. And so what this is doing is it's giving you a foil or a little contrast, because these all have very identifiable hues. They're all kind of saturated. This does two things. It's a break, but it also makes these, it kind of turns up the volume a bit. Because alone, they all have a kind of loudness to them. This sometimes actually makes these have more impact.
And that is, there was a question about, how you pull a bright palette, and we often want to pull a palette that has, if you can look in here, you'll see that, like these greens, we did not use the same saturation.
Oh, yeah, here's a great example.
So can you see how we paired?
This is not in there. Can you see why?
Right, because this is a way to, this was what a lot of people would do, which is assume that more brights
are better.
Yeah, that the more and more and more bright you get. And it's not to say you couldn't use it with it, but then
that would be a different palette.
Yeah, it then becomes really dominant because there's so much yellow in that green.
And if you put this highly saturated green next to these kind of mint and yellow greens, it can make them look a little washed out. When instead of using that, if I have this, suddenly the other colors
appear
brighter. So, there is such a tendency to say, I want the bright coming out of winter palette. Let's grab all the brights. And in the end, it's just simply loud. Now, if that's what you're after,
absolutely,
that's fine. But I've been to hundreds of show and tells at quilt guilds, and very often every guild has a handful of the bright people who love to make bright quilts, and will use mostly saturated fabrics. And in most cases, if there's sashing, it's going to be black or white. And I always encourage them, because they clearly love color, and I encourage them to try something a little different and see what happens.
Well, and that's what our essentials bundle, essential solids bundle is a bunch of non-black or white neutrals.
Yeah.
So let's, if you're looking, this is tip number 4, is to look at the quantity of the brightest fabrics versus the neutrals within the palette. So, for example, in the Paradise palette, this pale blush, it's kind of almost like a millennium pink, is paired with these other brights. So it isn't all, this level of saturation. No. The idea is that if you have a combination of lighter values and less saturated colors that go with the saturated colors, it becomes a little easier to see. And Pam said, a place to rest your tongue may be odd, but we do clear our palettes. But we typically don't clear our palettes in the middle of the course. You know what I mean? That's kind of what I'm saying.
You take in the soup as one thing, you clear your palette, then you go to the next course. And so we're kind of saying that's a similarity. Like you're looking at a quilt as a whole.
Yeah.
And there are parts within that quilt that are kind of the supporting role, but you take it in as one.
And the idea, she said, of like perky versus murky, that you can have perky and murky often together, and that's a really powerful way. It's not an all or nothing. It's learning and playing with it.
Yes.
And like I said, for us to pull this palette together, we spent about a half an hour. Right?
Yeah. I mean, this is what we do, and the two of us spent half an hour.
Audition, and there were 10 of them that we took out of there.
And what's interesting is when we were done, we both totally agreed. Like
there was no
but
the
can
second,
I just add this one?
I really wanted an olive green in here, and it was just too dark and it was too heavy.
Yeah.
So so the tip number 5 is to consider neutrals and desaturated colors for backgrounds and sashing, because if you're looking for a background, the background in terms of the volume is going to be a lot of the quilt. It's going to take up a lot of real estate, as will sashing. And so by having a background that is less saturated, it's going to compete less with this palette.
Yeah,
so this is a good role for desaturated
It's
fabrics.
back to that idea of a supporting actor in a film.
Yeah.
That even if the supporting actor is on screen a lot, you don't want to necessarily be distracted by that actor. So, and again, these aren't rules. This is just sort of kind of general. They're observations.
Things,
they are.
Yeah, you do whatever works for you. You do whatever makes you happy. But if you're looking for guidance on how to use brights, maybe try a desaturated color for a sashing or background, because you'd be surprised at how much stronger it'll make everything look.
And Pam, your perky versus murky comment is actually a good thing. It's not one or the other. That keeping in mind that saturation is a range, so it's like perkier, murkier. That even within this Paradise palette, the fact that this very pale one is definitely desaturated is vital. I mean, I think if you took the two most desaturated out, this is still really nice, but you add those, and I think you get more depth to it, just because it's a little murkier, maybe a little lighter.
And so again, looking at this palette, one of the things to think about, let's say you were making a quilt with this palette, how you bind it, and it's the same thing with the sashing that we talked about. Desaturated is often a good option for background or sashing. Binding is also something to consider, because if you wanted to have a bright binding or something, you might want to go with an analogous color that would be, or like this purple, that would be along the same side of the color wheel, as opposed to...
So basically, that analogous, that purple would be down here, so it's just touching on what's already in the palette.
Whereas putting like a bright blue binding on it would call a lot of attention.
And if you want that, then you do that. But
Right.
just be aware that it can draw a lot of attention. Now, I'm actually going to grab a photo of one quilt really
Okay.
quickly while she's talking.
So how you use the binding with brights will also be is an important tip for you. So if you decide you want a bright binding, go with something that's analogous, which would be next to each other on the color wheel, as opposed to something complementary, which would be on the other side of the color wheel. Okay, so number 7 is consider subtlety even among brights. So if you look at these two kind of orchid colors, I think of them as being, you can see that one is a little bit more purple in hue and one is a little bit more red in hue. And even when you're using brights, having these subtle differences
Subtlety rocks.
can be really fantastic. They look from a distance like they're too similar, but they really do a lot for each other.
They can add a bit of spark. And I actually want to show an example of a quilt. When we have these palettes of the month, we're doing 10 fabrics in each. And I want to show a photo of, let me just, try to get this straight. This is So Inclined, which is, okay, I've got to back up to get the focus there. It is a quilt that just uses half rectangle triangles, not half square triangles. And there's a background fabric and 10 different fat quarters. So it works perfectly with a bundle. But if you can imagine how that simple design could bring this to life, if you picked, whether it's that sand or that eggplant, you pick a background, and that pattern is in Fat Quarter Love.
So Diane, you asked about the 10 fabrics we took out and discussed why. You know, one of them was, for example, this green. And you can tell that it would have been, can you hold that up?
Okay.
You can see that it would have been just a little too dominant against those pastels. So part of the reason we decided to go with a gentler green palette was because that green seemed a little heavy.
Now, if we made this
Same
into
thing with the
20
purples.
fabrics,
Oh, yeah.
then you might be able to tiptoe towards this.
Yeah.
But when you have 10, each one has a lot of power to tip the scales.
And when we put that purple in there, we realized it was going to just feel too heavy and that we wanted to go in a lighter and airier direction.
Because it
So
is the
these are
darkest in value. That purple wouldn't have had any friends at the party. It would have
Absolutely.
been darker than everything else. And again, if you had 20 fabrics, you could get some darker greens or some darker magentas. Okay.
So tip number 8 is to think about thread color for quilting. And someone was asking me about thread color with brights. And no surprise, neutrals are often going to be your best friend on this.
And yellow.
Yeah, yellow often can work.
We have used so much yellow.
I
on
might
brights.
use pale pink with this particular palette, but yellow, pale beige, pale green, sort of depending on a pastel is surprisingly useful.
And you have to be careful not to go too light, because if you have saturated brights, if you go too light, a pastel may look almost white. And so I think sometimes having just a little more color in that thread than a little more saturation or a little more value than you think is probably what I would do. I would err on the side of less light.
Right. So let's talk about prints. So we have
Oh yeah,
our,
we've been talking solids nonstop.
So this is our Joy print, hot pink, from our Sunnyside line. And one of the things that, this is
Purple.
the Joy purple. And one of the things that is really hard to get people to understand sometimes with brights is that if you have a bright multicolored print, the best way to use it is with 4 or 5 other bright multicolored prints. You'll notice in the line, can you grab that, please?
This one?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You'll notice in the line that we didn't do one focus fabric and then a bunch of companion prints.
Side by
That
side.
they're all, actually hold up the, let's hold up the quilt instead.
Oh,
It'll be easier to see.
Okay.
Yeah.
You do that. I'll
You
do
can
this.
see that the prints, each of them look less dominant when you use them with other multicolored prints. And it seems, I think the best metaphor I've been able to come up with is that if you have one loud person at a party, they'd really dominate the conversation. Or if you have 10 loud people at a party,
It's a party.
it doesn't feel like the party's revolving around any one person. Yeah. So tip number 9 is if you're going to use bright multicolored prints like K-Facet or Tula Pink or any of those sorts of prints, using more of them, maybe from different collections,
That's
will
often
be
successful.
Yeah, as opposed to choosing the whole focus fabric and then pulling colors from it is one way to work, but it really limits the type of quilts that you will get from it because they'll all look focused on one fabric.
Yeah, it will always make that dominant, and especially so in the case of saturated focus fabrics, I think.
Yeah. Okay, so that's
making progress.
Tip number 9, yes. Tip number 10 is that when you're auditioning, as we were explaining here, don't hesitate to take things out.
Editing can mean adding and it can mean subtracting.
And even if you just, as we were developing this, I really wanted this green in there. I wanted it in there so badly.
I still want it.
I still want it in there. We needed like a bigger palette.
Yes.
But being able to say, I'm just going to take it out for a minute and see what happens. It's hard because you get really focused on starting with 1 or 2 things, and then sometimes you just need to pull it out.
Which actually is interesting. When we're building a palette, say, of solids, sometimes the color that we start with doesn't even end up in the final bundle. It leads you down.
But this was the second one. I was
the
sure
second
I
one.
wanted this in there.
And I actually love olive green with colors like these. Absolutely love it. But, every quilt is different. We were aiming to make a bundle of 10. It's a good round number. It's, that's what we're doing each month. But when you're making a quilt, sometimes the pattern calls for 8 fabrics. Sometimes it calls for 12. Sometimes it calls for 12, but you could actually use 18 and have it be more successful. So as you quilt, some people are pattern users, some aren't, but always look at the pattern and don't think that is set in stone necessarily. Sometimes more can add depth to it. Sometimes if you have a quilt that has 10 reds in it, maybe you go for 20 and you have some that are slightly more saturated, slightly desaturated, and you can get some unexpected depth and interest.
If we had really been adamant about having this green in there, we would have had to lose these paler fabrics, and then because the entire quilt or the entire palette would have had to go darker.
Which is beautiful. That's another
nice too.
Beautiful
But these
palette.
peaches were just, so fantastic with it. We decided to opt for that instead.
And part of the reason we're doing these palettes of the month is to give you that inspiration. Like, we don't want to just say, here, get more fabric. It's more like, look at how it works. Ask yourself what aspects of that you like. Oh, our dog, here's the mailman. And they're learning opportunities.
So one of the questions that we got was how to keep it bright but not chaotic.
Yeah.
So part of this is to think about the roles for the brights. If you have a pattern that has small areas of one color and large areas of other colors, use the brightest area in the smallest quantity, the brightest color in the smallest quantity.
Because it's the strongest. It's just like,
yeah.
I often give the example that if I invite you over and tell you I'm making lasagna, if I told you I'm using equal amounts of pasta sauce, pasta, garlic, salt, you're like, what?
Right.
You need things that are garnishes. You need things that are like, you don't want tacos where you have as many jalapenos as you do black beans or something.
So as you are looking at a bright palette or a palette with brights, look at the roll of the fabric in the pattern you're using, and look, are there equal amounts? In some cases, equal amounts is fine, but for example, then you may not want to have a palette of all brights. Equal amounts of this palette would be fine, but if you took out these and then you just had like equal amounts of neons, for example, that would be really hard visually without some neutrals to break it up.
And Diane, I like your question or comment about that it would have been interesting to see the fabrics we took out and discuss why. And I think that's absolutely something we can do specifically with a future palette. We've done that quite a few times in Modern Quilts Illustrated.
Yes.
For instance, I think in issue
7,
we have a full 2-page spread showing all the prints and solids that were in one of the cover, actually in the cover quilt, and we showed basically what worked, what didn't, and why. And we've done that in multiple issues. But that could be a good way to approach
maybe
a future palette of the month, is to kind of reveal, maybe go through the conversation we had. So thank you for that idea.
I think maybe we should do that with the palette of the month for April.
Yep.
And we'll do
Thank
that
you, Diane.
on the April Quilts First. But I think somebody also asked if we mix and match solids from different lines, and the answer is depends. Some fabric lines, even solids, have a sheen on it that can sometimes be a bit of a troublemaker if you're trying to use it with other solids in the same roll. If you're going to use a solid with a different sort of sheen, you need to use it consistently throughout the quilt, or else it will play tricks with your
Other than
mind.
that, we mix solid lines all the time. No matter what manufacturer you go to, they never have every color you want. Even if you have a line with 300 colors, you may need others. What Weeks is talking about, I'll specifically talk about, it's often called a Shriner finish in the fabric industry. And it's a high pressure finish where sometimes you see fabrics in the shop that seem a little satiny, very smooth. And it's generally not a chemical finish. It's that after the fabric is printed, it goes through high pressure rollers that flatten it out. And it does give it a bit of a shine. Over time, that sheen kind of goes away, but not, it's not predictable. And so I say we have bins and bins of solids from different manufacturers, and there's one manufacturer in particular that has beautiful quality fabrics, but they all have that pressure finish, and we actually don't use them at all because they don't play well with others.
They catch light in odd ways. But I wasn't talking about the Shriner finish. I was talking about, you can tell, like Kona, for example, is a coarser weave, and there are some new solid lines that are coming out with sheens on them.
Yeah, intentional sheens.
Yeah,
yes,
that
yes.
has like a metallic or pearlescent or whatever
Totally
like
different,
that,
yeah.
and that catches light in a really different way. Liz was talking about her color choices are complicated by the light source in her sewing area. And now, I feel like as long as you're well, this is also why when people say like, well, why did you paint your studio white? I mean, I see
it's white.
people, with bright aqua sewing studios, and I think, wow, that's really going to mess with your with your color work. But I think if your light source in your sewing area is on the warm side, and you're going to look at your quilt in that same light source, that's not a problem. I think the problem is when you go to a quilt shop that has a different light source, and then you come home and you're looking at it under different light in your house, that it might look odd. But
And quilt shops can be challenging because to keep fabrics from fading, they don't want them in natural light. And so it's often artificially lit. The one, I've been to a lot of quilt shops where I've said to them, do you mind if I just take the bolts outside for a minute? I'm not running away with them.
Yeah.
I just would like to see the light. But it's absolutely an issue that color temperature changes. A couple suggestions I have would be, there are very expensive color calibrated lights and OT lights for your workspace. Those are all fine and dandy, but if you can generally find bulbs for your more general lighting that have a better balance, I should say. I mean, we're kind of picky in that we happen to have lighting in our studio that is as neutral as we can make it, as close to kind of daylight without being harsh. But it's an issue.
I would say just choose your colors outside. Do a preliminary check inside, and then take it outside and give it a double check.
And then the other thing I want to say about brights that has to do with light is if you're dealing with a quilt shop, you have the challenge of artificial light. If you're shopping online, you have the challenge that every single person's monitor is calibrated differently. And if you have bright red, it will look bright red on your monitor. If you have bright green, it will look bright green. But if there are any neons or fluorescents in a print, they will not show as neon. They will show as bright, but neon or fluorescent, the really extreme colors, you can't actually display them accurately on any monitor. So I think there are some fabric designers who love to use like the highlighter yellow or really neon aqua. I would, if you know that that's in the fabric line, it helps to look at the quilt shop. Do they put that in the description? Because sometimes there are things in the description of the color that help you understand the color better than what's on the monitor. It's a tricky thing though.
So Christine wants to know whether a bright quilt dictates a different design in long arm quilting. I think we're definitely in the minority in terms of suggesting that typically simpler quilts can take more complicated quilting, and complicated color work, complicated prints, complicated piecing. It usually looks better in our eyes with a simpler approach to long arm quilting. So, if you like lots of thread changes and lots of different textures in quilting, go for it. If you're asking us what we would do, we would say err on the side of less.
Call us conservative, but
I want to see the piecing, and I want to see the color work. I don't want to be overwhelmed by the quilting if it's a complicated piecing and
with brights especially. And back to the show and tell, we see all the time at guilds quilts that are bright on black, that are long arm quilted with variegated thread it's just kind of the rainbow variegated thread. And that's often done because the quilters don't know where to pick a color, and it can have the unintended effect of creating patches of of
can be
quilting that is distracting. So I would encourage anyone who's thinking of using variegated thread on a bright quilt to kind of equalize it all, to reconsider and just like
use a neutral.
audition yellow, audition camel. You know, it's a different approach.
Yeah. So we've given you lots to think about, and we hope you will take a look at our pretty Sunnyside fabrics and our new alfresco kit, and we have some other things coming up for you this month.
Got a lot coming up. Can't say it yet.
Can't wait to talk to you about.
So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, we will see you. We'll see you probably before next month.
Yeah.
But we'll
one way or another.
One way or another, we will definitely see you on April 1st for Quilts First and on our YouTube channels. Oh, and also IG Quilt Fest 2022 is an online, it's kind of like a virtual quilt festival for a month.
On Instagram.
Amy's Creative Side hosts it, and we're participating. Today is introductions. If you look on Amy's Creative Side or our Instagram or Facebook page, you'll see the prompts, and you can participate. And you just use the prompts and the hashtag every day. And today it's introductions, so I hope you will consider joining that, because it's a fun way to get to know new people and new people's work.
Yeah.
So
take care. Stay
enjoy
safe.
the spring, and stay healthy, everybody.
Bye-bye.